have our second panel for the evening, Innovation and Disruptive Technologies. What are the latest trends and innovations in the e-commerce space? How are disruptive technologies like 3D printing and wearables impacting e-commerce? The panel is moderated by Bethan Alexander, Course Director, MA Fashion Retail Management at the London College of Fashion. Please welcome Bethan and the speakers of the panel.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here and to chair this panel with you. Just to set the context, I mean, we've heard a lot already from the other keynote speakers and certainly touched on a few of the aspects that we're going to be exploring a bit more in depth around technology from the previous panel. But I think we can safely say today that even more than ever, even the most innovative companies are worried about how to better connect with consumers that are not only more informed, but also more distracted. And, you know, technology, as we've already heard, infiltrates every aspect of our life. You know, when we look at the weather app first thing in the morning, and then when we're purchasing or browsing on our journey into work, and then when we're tucking up in bed with an ebook. So, you know, today we're going to be talking about hyper-connected consumers and how their demands have evolved, expectations have evolved, for interacting with both the social and kind of commercial worlds around them that are more increasingly shaped by technology. And that just yesterday, Euromonitor released a report just about that, consumers in the digital world. So some of the questions that I want to be exploring today: how are retailers ensuring seamless and frictionless customer interactions? How are they providing phygital experiences? Are they delivering what we now, hear a lot talked about, the Internet of Things, effectively? With so many channels, devices, and platforms to choose from, how are and will retailers retain shoppers? And where does technology fit into the store of the future? So we hope to explore some of those kind of questions. Just to put it within a fashion context, which is my background, I've worked in it for 25 years and studied it from a business perspective. Just in the last couple of weeks, Drapers, which is our kind of trade Bible, talked about an article called "The UK High Street Must Adopt Technology to Compete." And it discusses a report which was just published by the Digital High Street Advisory Board, which was set up by the government in April last year, which states that the UK High Street risks being left in the digital slow lane, causing many retailers to urge the government to invest in technology to enable them to better compete with the online. And they talk within that report about the digital revolution being arguably the most disruptive factor affecting not only our communities but also our business environment. And then at the same time, moving to the business of fashion, which explores, fashion from specifically a luxury, a more mainstream kind of perspective. They launched an article entitled "In-Store Tech, Sales Driver or Hype?" And that highlights not only the increasing adoption of technologies by major fashion retailers, but also beg the questions around, well, what is the return on investment? And we heard about that earlier for these innovations. Do they contribute to sales, or are they merely gimmicks? What purpose does innovative, disruptive technologies serve? And are shoppers actually engaging with them? Where do they add value? And what is their impact at retail? So again, hopefully we'll explore some of these questions today. And then finally turning to digital futures and looking at emerging technologies that will shape hyper-connected consumers' digital lifestyles in the next few years, including things like wearable technology and 3D printing, which are being stated as critical considerations for fashion retailers specifically hoping to stay ahead of the digital curve. So it's a pleasure to have an esteemed panel with me today to discuss some of those questions. And I'm going to ask each of them, starting with Matthew, to kick off a little introduction about themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Drinkwater, head of the Fashion Innovation Agency. We are a not-for-profit creative agency based at the London College of Fashion. And we are the bridge between the fashion industry and the technology industry, and we've become very well known for our work around wearable technologies, and we've been delivering projects for the likes of Nokia, Microsoft, and the Walt Disney Company.
Hi, I'm Nick Devlin. I'm an associate partner at OC&C Strategy Consultants. I guess we're a for-profit and not creative consultancy based in London. I'm subbing for Anita this evening, who is head of our retail practice in London. As you can probably see from the mugshot, is kind of immaculately, more, has better credentials and certainly the better wardrobe to do this event. But I'll do my very best to kind of bring a consumer's perspective this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Pierre Malevet. I run a small M&A boutique in the field of luxury and retail. I started my career in banking and then fell in the luxury part, running the acquisitions group for LVMH for a number of years.
And I'm Roman Kidd. I run the iMaker group, and we do two things. One is the distribution of desktop 3D printers, so machines that are roughly below to 3,000 pounds, fit on your desk. We do that through two stores, one in Clerkenwell, one in Manhattan, New York. And then we have a second business, which is basically to answer the question of why the hell would I want one of these machines in the first place? And that's myminifactory.com. So we're a social network, which also functions as a download platform for 3D files. So our USP is that we actually test every single object that is uploaded to the platform and offer them for free to 3D printer owners around the world.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start by exploring innovation, first of all. And I'd like to probably kick off with you, Nick, if you're happy,
Okay.
to talk about what is the role of innovation and where does it really fit within a fashion organization or any kind of organization?
I think whenever you look at businesses that have been successful over the medium term, a pipeline of genuine innovation is absolutely critical. And there's only so long that you can be successful by replicating what your competitors are doing or relying on kind of hard operating. And ultimately, whether it's fashion or whether it's any of the other retail industries we work in, having an ability to bring products to market first and products to market that are different is absolutely critical. And I think, probably our view would be that's only becoming more and more important as consumers' attention spans get shorter and the breadth of influences they're exposed to get wider. And so I think, for us, innovation is probably the most critical it's ever been for the fashion industry.
Okay. And Matthew, as head of fashion innovation, can you give us a fashion perspective?
Sure. If innovation isn't placed at the heart of a company, then they're not going to succeed, in short. I think innovation and customer expectation of what they're experiencing on the high street is there's a demand for newness, there's a demand for an experience. I think there were some quotes about surprise and delight. Consumers are treating stores as a beautiful warehouse. You can click and collect. You can go into a store, pick up your product. Consumers want to go into store, experience something great, get your product really easily. Sure, if you want to be at home, you can select a delivery time slot, but do you really want to be at home for a couple of hours? I think that demand for immediacy is making innovation really important for retailers and brands. And it's been really interesting working with a few corporations along that journey. So we've been doing some work with Microsoft. And there was some talk earlier of innovation labs and how effective they've been. And I think, it was great listening to hear someone say that innovation is only relevant when it adds some value to a consumer. When we started working with Microsoft, they were spending huge amounts of capital on research. And when their new CEO took over, just decided to shut down their innovation labs because it wasn't producing any product. If the consumer isn't engaged, if you're not adding something to that journey in store, then you shouldn't be doing it. Innovation should be changing the way that your consumers engage in store and how they experience your brand.
Okay, Pierre, do you want to add a perspective?
Yeah, well, I'm coming from the luxury world, and innovation is perhaps not the most pressing priority, even though it's a question of definition. I would say that every luxury brand, every fresh fashion brand has to innovate in that they have to bring fresh product and fresh ideas, but there's always a part of heritage, of craftsmanship, and that's not necessarily very tuned into innovation. So innovation is a multifaceted approach. It starts with product, but it's also in the efficiency of engaging your customer, of delivering client service, et cetera, et cetera.
And Ramon, you work in a very innovative space. What's your perspective?
Well, I'm probably going to sound like the most old-fashioned guy around the table, even though our products are probably the most innovative indeed. But I'm total fashion fraud. But we are trying to build luxury brands in the sense that we focus on best-in-class machines, desktop machines, and the best services we can provide with that. So we're not trying to sugarcoat the products. They're 3D printers. Most people have never seen any. It's really innovative. But we're trying to build a luxury brand in that sense around how we select the engineering skills that we invest in to understand the products, the hours and hours that we spend actually taking the machines apart, making sure that they work, making sure that our customers will have a great experience with it. So in that sense, innovation, sure, our products are innovative, but what we end up doing at the end of the day has been done for decades, if not centuries. It's e-commerce, it's operating in a couple of flagship stores today. So yeah, my take is probably more old-fashioned in that sense.
Yeah, okay. And how do you find, Nick, that working with a range of businesses, how do or should fashion or general businesses kind of capture innovative ideas? And what kind of structure is needed to bring them to life within an organization?
I think it's a balance here between, it can be very hard once you get to a certain scale of business to really nurture innovation and create the right culture to attract individuals who are truly going to bring transformative things through and change the way kind of whether it's people shop or people, the type of products people receive. And I mean, to take an example that's very unfashion, business that we worked with quite a lot was Argos, thinking about how they wanted to change and go on a digital journey. And for them, they very much had to set up a kind of separate lab in London where, to get the right type of people into the business. So I think our learning, certainly from working with very large businesses, is often you need to create something that has a culture that feels more like a startup type of culture, and somewhere where people are a bit more empowered to kind of take some risks and actually sit outside of the day-to-day organization in order to get a little bit of that, within an organization. So I think often, that's something that works quite well in a large corporate environment.
Yeah, I would agree. So we've just started doing some work with John Lewis, and my impression before I went to talk to them was that they would have these incredible innovation labs. And when I went and met the team, there's 3 of them in the basement next to their rubbish collection in Victoria. And John said to me, okay, Matt, this is going to be a really cool project, but we need to go stealth. I don't want to involve anyone else in the business. They have a turnaround of 6 to 8 weeks. So start a project, get it in store, test it. What's the reaction? Did it work? Great. Implement it, go wider. If not, just move on. So I think someone quoted fail fast. That is what technology is enabling brands to do, is to just try stuff. And I think that's my message would be to retailers, is just get out there. There are so many interesting startups to work alongside. Test, go quick, gauge a reaction. You can measure everything through analytics. So it's it's much better to work in a lean, fast, smart way.
But also collaboration, from what you were saying, is key to that.
Yeah, and I think collaboration, obviously we do a lot of that, but the way that major corporations are able to integrate smaller startups, and we do a lot of work with fashion designers as well, but bridging those gaps and working in different ways. I think no one company is going to have a hold on all of innovation. It's just not possible. So open up and speak to a wider community. It's an exciting way to work.
Okay, thank you. And who would you say is doing innovation well? It doesn't necessarily have to be fashion, but from perhaps your experiences or from what you've seen, read about, who do you think is doing innovation well and why? And what is it they're doing? Ramon, do you want to kick that
just
off?
to bounce back off of an idea that Matt was going on, is testing a lot of stuff, and failing is okay, but it's always frustrating, right? And I think the key word there is then execution. And companies or teams that can execute really well, to me, are innovative companies, right? So, it might be very common, but something like an Uber, when I see their growth these days, like I'm just so amazed that they can manage what they have done in 3, 4, 5 years. The valuations are huge and just they're all over the place, all over the planet, and they're serving millions of customers. They probably have millions of people on the supply side by now. So those are things that impress me as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's running a company. Execution, yeah.
And Pierre, within the luxury space, who's really driving innovation?
Well, we've other than Uber, but we spoke before of other brands and groups, but they're really multi-brand retailers. And I think in a multi-brand retailing environment is a completely different set of dynamics than in a mono-brand luxury name, where creativity probably matters more. Or let me rephrase that: where the attention of the team, the creative heart, the CEO is more about creativity, is more about the product. Of course, anything that can improve the efficient delivery of the product to the customer is a plus, and people strive for that. But more than innovation, creativity, I think, is a higher priority.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's kind of, from our perspective, quite interesting. You think about the multi-brand world and department stores. I think one of the things that we do see in fashion in particular is really exciting disruptive innovation is around breaking down the traditional cycle in which customers get exposed to new brands or learn about new trends. And actually, I think that poses quite a fundamental challenge for some of the big, people like big department stores, where traditionally their role was to help consumers discover exciting new brands and to curate them. And you've got a whole generation of consumers who are growing up, discovering brands in a totally different way. So I don't know if anyone saw an interesting report earlier on in the year, was looking at the top brands for teen girls in America. And kind of the most desired brand of this year was a brand called Brandy Melville. Actually, it's kind of an Italian heritage business. I think operates about 18 stores in America. But the business model for them is all about getting product out to a close network of followers who are then photographed wearing it, out and around in it. I think there's about 2.5, 3 million Instagram followers. And that really is the channel that they use to generate interest, generate buzz, and then translate that mainly into online sales. That's an incredibly different world and way for people to be discovering product than a traditional, quite tightly managed retail experience. And so for someone like a big department store, how are you going to make sure you're tapping into that next generation of customers and you're still the relevant place that people are discovering their next designer brand? Because that's really your raison d'etre. And if you can't provide that, then you start to have quite a weak hand left to play.
Matthew, from maybe a fashion perspective, who's driving innovation? What are they doing?
I'm going to be controversial and say I'm still waiting to be really excited by something on the high street that is innovative and disruptive. And I'd be really interested to see what the pure play retailers are going to do in terms of bricks and mortar. I think that's what interests me most. I think, looking at a customer journey where a consumer can get a push notification, but let's take them in store. Let's use data to make that retail experience much more about you as an individual rather than just what new product is available. And I think, data will drive, and certainly IoT in a sensor-led environment will create a personalized retail experience which is beyond anything we've experienced. And I always talk about what in retail is exciting is taking that experience of what your local corner shop can do, where they know you, where they know what you like. They know that you come every Friday. They know that you like this particular product. They know what your neighbor came in and bought. That's beautiful to do when you've got some great sales associates in one store, but to do that at scale is not possible. But big data will enable retailers to do that at scale. And when you can do that and start to manage that customer journey, then I think we're in a really exciting place. And, just as an anecdote, I ordered something from a footwear store, click and collect, and they said, yeah, you can collect this within 3 to 5 days. And when I went to the store, not even reading my email, I just assumed that I could go and collect it within a couple of hours. They were like, the staff members, maybe go upstairs, I don't know what to do. And that perception that, retailers think that their staff are great, some of them are great, but the majority are not great. You tell me when you had a good experience. When you have a great retail experience, you remember it. What we want to use data to do is to transform that experience for every single customer in every store. And when you can do that, and we are going to be able to do that, it's really powerful.
I'm glad you talked about click and collect. Someone mentioned about 56% of John Lewis's sales is done through click and collect. That is the most basic
John Lewis,
and
yes.
warehouse experience I've ever had in my life when I did click and collect through John Lewis.
That's the store.
Waiting
as
to
a
happen to be
beautiful
experienced.
warehouse,
Yeah.
and you can collect within 1 or 2 hours.
Absolutely.
Great. Size, come on, 3 to 5 days?
Absolutely.
What?
Well, you both mentioned disruption within the context of innovation, and that moves us nicely on to looking specifically at disruptive technologies. And I think, first of all, it'd be quite useful to define what do we mean by disruptive technologies, and then what types of technologies are disruptive for retailers. Ramon, do you fancy taking this one first?
For retailers, the whole digital part. Oops, sorry. Yeah, the world going digital. I think mobile is not exploited enough. When I go to a store, I don't necessarily have to take my phone out, or if I do, it's completely unrelated to what the retailer has to offer. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we could be making use of, but we're absolutely not. And big data is probably not being used at all as well in that context. So we're more in a phase where it's going to be about connecting all these different types of technologies and actually creating value for the experience, in-store experience, for example. And so there's nothing that I can see happening that everybody wouldn't know already, right? But it's about actually making use of that technology in the retail store, and mobile is probably the biggest one then.
Great. Nick?
I think probably from my perspective, I'm more interested in things like how Instagram or Pinterest are redefining how people discover product that they love, especially in a fashion context, than I am necessarily about kind of harder technology and how that's playing out in store. So I think from a traditional high street retailing perspective, the first big shake-up was, customers have gone online, they've got access to buying the same product if you're selling branded product that you have, from 20 different places, and it's quite it's an obvious competition on price and kind of getting the product there. That's kind of step number one. I think step number two, though, is now becoming really interesting, which is there are a whole other set of really interesting experiences and ways to discover, what's exciting, what's trendy, and what's fashionable. And I think actually that's probably a more profound change, and I think a bigger disruptive threat to the role of the traditional retailer, because I think it really requires them to reimagine what is part of their core DNA and what do you have to do to be a successful fashion retailer, especially if you're operating in a multi-brand environment.
Okay. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it just dawned on me that it's not so much the technology in itself that is interesting, it's more the use that you put it to, and therefore the idea and the goal of it. And we mentioned Uber before, but for anybody who's ever tried to catch a taxi in Paris at 6 p.m., Uber was a real godsend and is really making a big dent into taxi use in Paris. But just a couple of examples. I've been dragging my heels in the luxury sector for the last sort of 15 years, and I've seen countless startups trying to establish a standard in security tags for watches or for bags, and also countless startups trying to sell a 3D modeling technology to try on clothes remotely, and none of those has ever succeeded in setting a standard. But there are indeed some successfully disruptive technologies, and a couple of examples I have one is Warby Parker that we spoke of before, and I think that they are very impressive in, appearing like a brand, behaving like a brand, being a brand, whereas they're compressing the layers between production and retail by smart use of digital and physical stores. And the other thing that I found interesting recently is I'm associated with a company called Acne Studios, which is a fashion company, and the company's grown quite a lot, and we do have, like many fashion retailers, a lot of overstock, excess inventory at the end of the season, and we've been approached by numerous discounters, and we've always refused to sell our clothes through the discount channel because of brand integrity reasons. And the solution we've found is that we're doing now flash sales on the internet of excess stock, but limited to a couple of days and limited to certain markets where we feel it's not going to have a big impact. So I think this is not the use of any fancy technology, it's just a smart use of basic internet selling.
So using technology in a really controlled
way.
Yeah. You also touched, Pierre, on about kind of value adding, and I think a couple of the other panel members did as well. The tech space is obviously clearly crowded. How do we differentiate between, and it picks up on what the Business of Fashion article was suggesting, between kind of gimmicky technology and truly disruptive technology? I think about Burberry. For all the great press they got when they came out with their kind of digital flagship store on Regent Street, they also got some bad press about, well, who wants to go in store and just surf an iPad? I can do that in my bedroom. I mean, is that really adding value? So there was a lot of bad press around that as well, around kind of the gimmickness of that. So just picking up on that from a luxury kind of perspective, how do we start to differentiate between kind of what is a gimmick and what really adds value to the consumer experience? And can we start to think of examples of best practice where, fashion retailers are really kind of being innovative in that retail physical space by utilizing technology?
Well, one of the things that as I said just before, the 3D modeling, security tags, all those things never really caught on, and what matters for the luxury sector is really the power of the brand, the creativity behind the brand. And one of the things I'm really excited about is 3D printing. A lot of people have been criticizing 3D printing because of the added risk of counterfeiting and copying, where I don't really think it's a big risk. I think that quite on the contrary, it will enable designers, it will open up a whole new universe of possibilities, mixing organic material with inert materials. I remember I was telling Romain at the break, seeing a video, somebody was showing a 3D printed piece of leather. And I think that opens up a whole new world of possibilities for fashion companies and brands.
Great. Well, we're going to talk about 3D printing very, very shortly. But just sticking with, unless you guys want to talk about 3D printing now, or should we...
we can do gimmicks. I get accused of doing gimmicks all the time.
Yeah, gimmicks versus truly added value technology.
Yeah, I guess we do a lot of projects at London Fashion Week, which, I guess opens us up to the potential criticism that what we're doing is just PR stunt. But I guess what we try to do with all of the clients that we work with is deliver projects which are going to deliver meaningful change within a particular industry. So again, we specialize in wearables and wearable technology, and we did a project with Microsoft around wireless charging trousers. They were real. So we took their inductive chargers and built them into a pair of trousers, and when you put your phone in your pocket, hey presto, you have...
That is just some flashing shoulder pads away from an episode of The Apprentice.
But hey, we sold it on Amazon's Wearable Tech platform, and they were expensive. I think they were about £900 each, and we sold maybe two.
Are you wearing some?
I think they were a 28-inch waist, so I could try. And again, when we did the project with Disney and Tinkerbell and delivered the Tinkerbell dress, that was a huge moment for wearable technology, and has almost become that benchmark. But I think the customer expectation is so high of what you're going to deliver that almost immediately we started getting criticism of, oh, okay, that's really beautiful, but it's not real, is it? You can't go and buy this now. And I think customers see something, you know, that product is out there, their expectation is that that's delivered immediately. And so, you know, it forces us to look at how we manufacture a product which, you know, was designed as a complete one-off, and, you know, it begins to develop. So what I would say is that, yes, there can be criticism around particular projects that get launched, but if it's moving the conversation forward, if you're making a difference, if, you know, I'm not overly excited by product placement. We want to try and deliver products or projects which are genuinely working with designers and technology and fashion retail to make a change and to try and change consumer behavior. When you're doing that, then ultimately you're making a difference. And there isn't going to be one big moment where people go, oh, I get wearables. Well, it may have just happened last week, but yeah, maybe that one. But, you know, the application will be so wide, but I think people just, brands and retailers and technology companies need to keep that communication and keep engaging, and don't be put off by a bit of criticism.
Yeah. Well, I think you've brought us nicely onto kind of the next question that acts as a hybrid between kind of disruptive technologies and looking at kind of the current buzzword, the Internet of Things, which is merging into not only connected stores, but also connected people, wearable tech, etc. Before we get on to kind of defining kind of, you know, what do we mean by wearable tech, what do you think, first of all, is really driving the increased use of tech in store? And then let's move it on to kind of the Internet of Things and the broader conversation around kind of emerging technologies and wearable tech. Nick, do you want to take that?
I think, you know, the increased use of technology in store, from our perspective, actually, it's quite an early stage. So customers have brought technology into store, and customers are very comfortable showrooming stores, and they're very comfortable comparing prices and shopping elsewhere. I think the number of retailers who've genuinely embraced technology and brought it into store in a way that really adds value and redefines the way customers shop is actually somewhat more limited. So I think, you know, there are starting to be signs of things that are interesting. So for us, we're quite interested to see Target in the US was going quite a long way down, trialing the use of beacon technology to get to a world where you can genuinely push customers a personalized promotion that's relevant to them and based on knowing stuff about their history transacting with your brand. But seeing, you know, in the fashion space, someone take that and extend it to its logical conclusion, I think we're still a way away from that. I mean, you could certainly imagine a world where if you could be saying, you've got someone coming into your store and, you know, here's an exclusive offer for you, which is 25% off Levi's, you know, that's great news, and it's also a lot better from a retailer than having to be in a world where I'm 25% off for everyone if I don't need to be. So I don't know, I think we're quite early days in terms of really seeing retailers push the boundaries of technology in store.
Yeah. Does anybody want to pick up on that before we move on to wearable tech and 3D? Well, let's move on to that now, within that kind of Internet of Things space. So, first of all, let's kind of define what we mean by wearable tech and 3D printing. What does it mean to you, Roman?
Yeah, so I'll talk about 3D printing, right? And
Yeah.
Matt will probably talk about wearable tech, but 3D printing is a notion, maybe a concept nearly, but it's taking a digital file, and that's, you know, something you can share in an email, like an MP3 of Lady Gaga, and turn into a physical object through this machine, right? So you need the machine, of course. You need the consumables, the material that you use to make this object, and you need the digital file, right? And that's really it's really the powerful thing around 3D printing. The object is built layer after layer, so there's technically no waste. And as much as in theory you'd like to be able to 3D print anything, the reality is, you know, you're limited by volume, for example. You're limited by the materials you're using, but you're also, and more importantly, limited by the creativity of the designers, right? So you'll get, and more, and this is a word that came up before, you know, more applications for this technology as more and more talented designers try to spend some time trying to solve problems and working around certain of the limitations of a machine and making the most of what it really allows. So yeah, I define 3D printing like that.
Okay, great. And wearable tech? Matthew?
Oh, wow. Wearable tech, will help change the way that consumers experience a store visit, the way that they engage with their friends. I think, where we always get asked to define wearables, the usage will be so wide that it's really tough to do that. But I think, just to summarize, the kind of projects we're working on is more about connected clothing and smart materials, and looking at how we can integrate what this does into our clothing. So maybe at some point I can change my Empire Strikes Back sweatshirt into a Return of the Jedi sweatshirt at the touch of a button. And how cool will I look when that happens? But wearables will enable consumers to go into store and begin to transact with the store in a completely different way, and transact with their friends. Can you imagine a situation where you can download content onto your clothing, change the color of your clothing through the click of a button, pay for your clothing pay for your purchases through your clothing, how you would interact with your friends? I think it's a really exciting time.
A last question, because I've had the nod. Within that space, obviously both are gaining traction, but they're still emerging technologies. What are some of the major impacts and challenges for both, for retailers? And how do they start embracing and kind of leveraging these technologies into the future?
Yeah, the real value of 3D printing today is in rapid prototyping. So it's really in the office, in the design studio, having an ID, and then turning it into a physical object. And you can communicate around this object, you can share, you can look at it in different angles. It's 3D in 3D, it's not 3D on a 2D screen. So that's the value created today. And there's 20 million 3D designers in the world, so there's still a long way to go in this whole market of rapid prototyping. Now, more and more, and that's the vision behind what we do at iMaker, is these machines are going to be accessible from anywhere. That might mean at the office, but it might mean at the library, at the school, it might mean at home. And then the real disruption is going to come through talented designers understanding how to build, it might be accessories, what you call accessories, for these more central products, which might still have a lot more intelligence and might be produced in more traditional ways, or at least centralized versus decentralized. And it's going to open up how retailers and design companies think about their products and how to release them. So I think we're going to see a very similar evolution as just like software, for example, with the internet. We're doing the same thing with stuff, with physical objects. So if you have a phone today, most people, I guess, in this room have either an iPhone or an Android phone, right? Nobody has a Windows phone because there's no apps, right? It's going to be the same thing when you choose a product in the future, right? You're going to be looking at not what's in the box, but how big are the applications that you can plug into? How well furnished is the App Store for which you can download, an accessory? We did an exercise with a vacuum cleaner, right? And I think that's a perfect example. Who cares about buying a nozzle, right? You want to buy the opportunity to make any kind of nozzle, right, on this machine that you have in your living room, which costs you nothing to print a nozzle. So it's going to be about figuring out what's core, what's central, and for a vacuum cleaner, it might be, high pressure, constant pressure, no noise, right, no bags, boom, that's it, that's your central product. But all the rest, and nozzle ones in particular, you don't care about it. So you'd rather tap into communities, global communities of great designers. The business models are not in place yet for these designers to generate revenue from these applications because we're in the chicken and egg phase, and I think that's one of the things where differentiating a gimmicky technology from a real one, it's the timing, right? No technology is not here and the next day it's here. It takes time to evolve, and I think the timing question is very important. So we're still in the very early days, and I think the biggest transformation is yet to come. There's still a long way to go for the value that's being created today. But the biggest disruption is about opening up the world of design to people who would never have access to creating objects for people to consume, right? And will only be able to emerge as talents because they have the avenues, because they have the app stores, because they have these business models that will be put in place for them to actually make a living out of their talent. So.
Do we have time to just get the wearable perspective?
I'll be
Impacts
really
and
quick
challenges?
on wearables. I think I saw a recent survey which said 30% of UK consumers think wearables make you look ridiculous. And so that's a big challenge. You know, if you're going to make a wearable, let's make it nice. And if you're a retailer, do you have the environment ready to work with wearables? Are you ready for the Apple Watch? Do you know what that could do to your consumer's journey in store? Are you ready to engage with that? That's what I would say.
Okay, great. Let's open it up to the audience for some questions. We've got one up here and then one over there.
Hi, thank you. I was very interested by the last interaction about the 3D printing. We're launching a 3D printing company that prints in fine jewelry. So we print from gold, and we also include some craftsmanship to actually enable the designers to just focus on their design and allow them to liberate their creativity. And I think that that's something that's going to make a big, big difference. But we don't have the amount of money that Ray-Ban has to just buy a company and just vertically integrate it. So we could... Although I wish, if anybody wants to invest. If you could give us a bit of a sense of how you would prioritize your investments in this very difficult technology. Creativity is difficult to find, but we try to enable them. How can we best give them that platform?
So on the machine side of things, we focus on desktop machines, and those are relatively cheap, but I mean, there is a bit of a capital cost, I guess. We don't focus on the more industrial or professional machines that you might be using. And 3D printing is not going to be only in the home or only in the cloud or only in the local service bureau. It'll be a mixture of these things, just like the 2D printing world. And so I think today, that's probably what you guys are doing. You're getting access through Shapeways or whatever it is to decentralized production, and you pay per print, right? And so you only have to basically spend money when you sell something. And I think that's a huge advantage versus what the world was like maybe a few years ago, where you would have to build stock and hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to sell or the company goes down, right? I think there's a lot more opportunity to try stuff, to fail, right? And okay, some design works, some design don't, but at least there's no big losses there. So that's I think that changes a few things, and being as lean as possible and not spending too much capital and investing too early is very good. But then the challenge is about building communities, right? So you guys are pretty much a platform, right? And you've got a bunch of designers all around the world, and you're going to have to build this community and the business models that go with it in such a way that they can make a living somehow, right? And I'm not familiar enough with your specific industry to say how that will work, but that's the real challenge at the end of the day. It's figuring out those problems, and it's online, it's web, it's community management. It's a lot of experimenting at the end of the day, because people are probably not used to doing work like that, and I see it with designers who don't necessarily understand the power of investing time and resources to build a brand and so on. We offer files for free at the end of the day on the platform, so we're not generating any kind of revenue like that. But you have to experiment. It might be paying one-off for the designs, right, with some people. Maybe it's sponsoring others with, I don't know, the machine or access to a machine or whatever. You've really got to keep an open mind, especially given that, chicken and egg, very early days. The demand side is not there yet. It's not huge enough to generate or to justify these business models to miraculously be put in place, right? So early days, so experiment a lot until you find the business model that works for you guys.
We had a question over here.
Hi, it's Matthew. I'm really intrigued. A lot of people talk about innovation and setting up innovation departments despite commercial costs. If you're running a not-for-profit in an educational system, how do you justify your system year to year? And what's your case for existing within that?
So we're European funded to be a bridge between the fashion industry and the technology industry primarily, but it's to stimulate the growth of both of those industries. And what we're seeing is that, you know, on the one side, there's this huge emergence of the wearable technology industry, which fashion needs to be a part of. But what we've got on one side is lots of very talented fashion designers. On the other side, lots of great engineers and coders, and a big gap in the middle. And what we're almost beginning to try to do is to establish that middle ground and begin to bring those two worlds together. And, you know, ultimately we're looking at finding designers who have coding skills, engineering skills, and there are very few available at the moment, but it's almost generating a new industry. So effectively, that's what we're there to do, and that's why we exist.
Do we have any other questions? We wrap up? Okay, can I thank the panel members, please?